Hello, welcome to Longshot Larry's Sports Astrology. Today we're looking at the final of the BBL, or the Big Bash League 2020 cricket competition here in Australia, Perth. Perth Scorchers are hosting the Brisbane Heat. Perth are strong favourites. So I've drawn up a chart for the start of the game. So we're going to look at what's happening here. So with the Frawley method, we've got a Cancerian ascendant, which represents the favourites Perth. So the moon rules Cancer. That's in Cancer too. So normally we look at the sign the moon is in, see what planet rules that sign, and that would represent the favourites Perth, but we can't do that. Perth also represented by Mars, because that rules the Aries 10th house, whereas Brisbane are going to be represented by Capricorn and its ruler Saturn, and the ruler of Libra down here on the 4th house, and Venus. Now looking at the moon here, you can see that stands out right away. It's in the very last 10 minutes of arc of Cancer. We call that void of course. So when the moon is past 27 degrees in a sign that's not going to aspect any of the other planets, it's called void of course. And you can see it's about a degree past the opposition to Pluto here. Now traditionally when you get a void of course moon in these charts, some astrologers would say that represents not much happens and the favourite wins. In traditional Horary astrology, it is interpreted as this chart is not fit to be judged. In other words, it's going to be very hard to get an answer out of this chart as to who's going to win this game. So we just need to keep that in mind. I tend to leave games with the moon void of course. They seem to be very difficult to interpret. Now the moon will move into Leo in about 10 minutes of arc, or 20 minutes, about 4:50 p.m. in Perth there. And what I have found is you will get a change in momentum when the moon changes signs. So looking at this, we can see that Mars is applying to an opposition to the part of fortune very, very wide. It's over 5 degrees. Mars does rule the midheaven, the 10th house, therefore the favourites Perth. You could read that as one for the underdogs Brisbane. Looking at the Antiska positions on the outside, you can see that Venus, the Antiska of Venus, which rules the 4th house, is on the IC. So that's another one potentially for the underdogs Brisbane. So Brisbane have a couple here potentially, if the void of course moon doesn't stuff everything up. Now look at the Perth team now. So I use the first game chart. So this is the time the first game that a franchise played in a particular competition starts, and I've timed all these ones. So this is the one for Perth. They're all similar in the Big Bash League. They're within 3 days of each other, but there are some slight differences. So we're looking at the sun as a symbol of success in these first game charts, on-field success. And you can see in this case here, Saturn is just past a sextile to the sun for the Perth first game. And Perth's sun is sextile Saturn natally quite tight, so that's very positive. You'll also see that the moon's going to move into Leo, and it will sextile the moon in the first game chart. Now, that looks okay for Perth. Perth captain Ashton Turner. So when you're looking at cricket, I think the captain is more important than the coach, because they're making the decisions on the field. So once again, we're looking at the sun position as a symbol of success. His sun is in Aquarius. I couldn't see much happening with his Aquarian sun. Then you look to the ruler of the sun. So Uranus rules his sun. That's in Capricorn. Couldn't see much happening there. What about his Mars? Mars is another indication. If you get a Jupiter Mars or something like that, that can be another winning indication. He has got Saturn 135 degrees away from his Mars, so I don't think he'll be top scorer today. So that's a bit of a challenge there. Next thing we're going to look at, we're going to bring up the progressions for Ashton Turner. So if you're not aware, the progressions are where the planets are, and we use a day for a year symbology. So you can see Ashton Turner is now 30. So we move the planets forward 30 days from his birth. So 30 days from 25 Jan 1993. And these tend to be internal motivators within a chart. So the position of the progress sun becomes important. In this chart here, his progress sun is now up into Pisces, and it is semi-square his progressed Uranus. So progress Uranus is still going to be in charge of his sun, and that's now moved to 20 Capricorn. So that is semi-square. But you also see that Uranus, natally, and Neptune are sextile his Venus. So progress Uranus is moving closer to that, and we can see that Mercury is just past a conjunction to his progress Uranus, which rules his Aquarian sun, and applying to a sextile to Venus. Now, that's not overly strong, but it is one possible indication of a Perth victory. Looking at the first game for Brisbane, so they played a few days earlier, so their sun is 24 Sag instead of 26. It's not as close to the sextile to Saturn as the Perth one. You can also see that Neptune then, at 23 Pisces 42, is applying to a square 17 minutes away from the Sun there. So you'd have to say on the first game, charts at the edges with Perth there. They have better alignments there. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because the Brisbane coach Jimmy Peirson, how does he line up? Well, he's a Libran, and his sun is down here on the IC at the start. You would prefer it on the MC as a symbol of success, but still his sun is being triggered by the angles in this game. It would be better if there was a planet trine or sextile that, which we don't have. Can just mean he starts well, or his team starts well in that case. But it is something positive. Now he's a Libran, so we're going to look at Venus. Here it is up here. He has Venus conjunct Pluto natally, widely sextile Neptune. But that's a very important area for him in terms of success. So what's happening with this particular degree here, or his sun? See Jupiter up here at 6 Aries 41 is 135 degrees away, quite close to his Pluto and potentially his Venus. Now Jupiter aspects tend to be quite good, so that is one potential winning indicator for Jimmy Peirson. In their last game against the Sydney Sixers, the moon was in Cancer and it was exactly square Jupiter during the game, forming a, what they call a Thor's hammer pattern down to this area, which is stronger. The moon's moved on, so it might be as strong today, but that's something he's got good going on. As the moon moves into Leo, it's going to sextile his Jupiter, which is handy, but it doesn't relate to his Sun or Venus, so we don't know whether that rules his success. He's also got Uranus applying to a sextile to his Mars, which is helpful. However, Mars is opposite Uranus and Neptune natally. So when that happens, Uranus sextiles and trines to his Mars aren't going to be as positive as they normally would be if it's in opposition natally. So you do have to take into account what position the planets are natally when you're interpreting this. So overall though, he looks pretty good. And here's his progressions on the outside. I didn't see anything going on with the progressions. So in summary here, I think this moon void, of course, is really throwing a spanner in the works for this today. Normally I wouldn't look at this game, but I promised people I would go through the system on how I look at cricket games. Frawley method, if it is applicable today, is pointing to Brisbane, the underdogs. Perth first game looks okay. Ashton Turner, well, I think the Brisbane coach Jimmy Peirson looks better, which is pretty important because they're the most important player on the field. I think here the key is that void of course moon. This would be a massive upset if Brisbane won. For an upset of this magnitude, I would prefer another upset indicator, such as a strong Pluto aspect or something like that. It's not there. So traditionally not much happens, the favourite wins, that void of course moon. The Frawley method does suggest Brisbane the underdogs. First game I would give to Perth, the captains I would give to Brisbane. So, I mean, it is saying Brisbane are a pretty good chance here from the Astrology. Personally, I can't see that happening. I still think Perth will win, but Brisbane are probably good value. Anyway, hopefully the next video will be a bit clear. We'll have something a bit clearer, which will be the Super Bowl, and we're looking forward to that one. So please like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.